Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Neumann, why do university awardees receive the highest average budgeted indirect cost? I think it's 27% in 2016 compared to other awardees.
Well, we're still evaluating the reasons for that, but NSF has told us, some of the things that they believe goes into that, and a lot of it is just the nature of the research being done, facilities that are needed for that research, and I think the important thing is we're looking at this data at a high level, and to really understand what that data means, you need to go down to almost an award by award level so you're comparing apples to apples, university to university to see what you're paying for the same type of research. And so I think that's what the level of analysis you would need to understand some of the reasons for the universities being higher.
But we're talking about an average, so that means it's pretty uniform, routine that it is higher. I think it raises some concerns about the budgeted indirect cost. Let me ask you this: for an organization to be reimbursed for indirect cost, it must have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with the federal agency. How can this process be improved at NSF?
Sure. I think what we're seeing is that we'd like to see consistency in applying the guidance for the rate setting process, make sure that there's supervisory review and that the guidance is clear. I think that's going to be really important to ensuring that you have effective process for managing indirect cost rates, having the data being helpful in identifying where the indirect costs might be growing if they are, having that guidance and ensuring that staff are implementing it correctly.
Your agency, the GAO, released 2 reports on NIH and indirect costs. Were your findings for NSF similar to those previous findings, or were there any significant differences?
On the rate setting process, we had similar findings in the NIH report where we saw there could be some improvements in the internal control for the rate setting process, including supervisory review and having clear guidance, particularly for changes that came out of the uniform guidance in 2014.
Well, GAO cited some deficiencies in oversight of grants, indirect cost claims by agency watchdogs. Are we seeing adequate amount of scrutiny on these grants, on the indirect cost claims?
Well, the NSFIG has continued to monitor that and has done a number of audits over the years and continues to do that. And we understand NSF has some things in place that they do to monitor the expenditures, but we did note in our statement that NSF doesn't have complete data on expenditures of indirect costs. It's more done on the planned award budget level. So NIH, for example, does have that data on indirect cost expenditures that may be useful if you're trying to monitor any improper use of indirect costs.
Well, Mr. Dodaro and I have had several conversations about the problem of improper payments and how do we stop that. Let me ask you this: what are the penalties for organizations that are found to have charged inappropriate indirect costs? Are the penalties sufficient to ward off bad actors? And by the way, just for the rest of the committee's information, the improper payments last year was $133.7 billion. That's money we had to borrow since we're in a deficit. So I'd like to know if there's anything that we can do at any level of the federal government, and particularly right here, since that's the topic of this hearing, to ward that off.
Yeah, I think there's some similar themes in terms of in this case as well, and that would be just having the data, analyzing that data to know where there might be anomalies, and then being consistent in implementing the guidance for the indirect cost rate setting process, and having the ability to review that information when expenditures come in.
Appreciate your answers. Thank the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.